Call the regular town council meeting of Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 to order. The first thing is roll call.
Nicholas,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Steve,
Yep.
Roman,
Here.
Michael,
Here.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mayor Janet.
Here. And do we have anybody here for public comment tonight?
Janet, I just wanted to say a couple things. Katie Harper, 15 Marcelina Lane. Real
Okay.
quick. As the council plans to return to in-person meetings, I just wanted to implore everyone to continue working on a virtual connection option for the public. I think there's a lot of good reasons for that. So I just wanted to put that forth at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here for public comment tonight? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Lauren, can you itemize the items that are on the consent agenda as part of your motion and then amend the second as well?
Sure.
Thanks.
I move to approve the February 28th, 2020 Town Council special meeting minutes. I'm sorry, special meeting. The March 1st, 2022 Town Council minutes and the March 9th, 2022 Town Council special meeting.
Thank you.
And the second accepts that?
I do.
Okay. All right, Leah,
Dwayne,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Nicholas,
Yes.
Mayor Janet.
yes. Under correspondence, we have a letter from Region 10 regarding our membership. We have a thank you letter from Western for the $33,000 that we sent them for the scholarship fund. And then we have the annual report from the Reserve Metro District #1 to look at. And moving on to business, the first thing is the annual update for the Gunnison Valley Regional Housing Authority. Is Jennifer? Yeah, Jennifer's here. So I will turn it over to her and thank you for being here.
You're certainly welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here with an annual report. We haven't been able, well, we've been able to do it last year, but we did not. So I'm happy that we're doing it this year. And I know that you have it in your packet, so I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I will go through some of the highlights. As you probably have heard me say before, once COVID hit in March of 2020, our work at the Housing Authority ramped up to a pretty high level of activity, and it has stayed that way, including through 2021. So we stayed pretty busy, doing a lot of marketing to homeowners, trying to get our deed monitoring done. We did a lot of revamping at the very end of 2020 for the Housing Authority. We changed up some staff, and so we changed a lot of our staffing plan. And kind of made things a little more seamless. So all the property management went under one person, all the bookkeeping and finance went under one person. Heat has always been under one person, but so we had the opportunity to experience that through 2021, and it seems to work quite well. So some of the things that my staff accomplished, our housing specialist or property manager, Chris Peterson, we put all of the properties underneath her, which is Anthracite Place. We manage Elk Valley. We now manage the Ruby for the town of CB. We manage Mountain View Apartments down here in the city. And so those have all fallen under Chris Peterson's reign, and all of those properties in 2021 retained a 95% plus economic efficiency rate. So even though some of those properties experienced turnover and some vacancies throughout the year, they were still able to remain quite profitable for the property owners. And generally, the vacancies that we saw in property management were due to when somebody moved out, we had to spend some time, and sometimes it took several weeks to get a property cleaned up or get a unit cleaned up and get it prepared for another tenant to come in, because not all of our tenants were really good housekeepers. And then the same issues that everybody has faced in finding vendors and subcontractors to do a lot of that small work that doesn't really pay a lot, but we were able to keep up the properties all operating at a pretty high economic efficiency rate. And we have done through the end of 2021, and we are continuing it now, we are still applying for a lot of emergency rental assistance program money, or the ERAP money that came out of the state and the feds in the fall of last year. So we've been getting a lot of our tenants rental assistance through that program, which has actually saved a lot of people and kept them in their housing. So we're pretty excited about that. That was definitely a bonus for a lot of them. And that's part of why that economic efficiency rate could stay so high, even with some long-term, I call them long-term. If property is vacant for 2 weeks, I feel it's vacant long-term. But anyways, so our property management worked well. In our finance and administration, we have taken on a loan servicing portfolio from another housing agency. We did that in agreement with the Division of Housing for our rehab and down payment grant programs. Both of those are now, we turn those, they're grant money to us, we turn them into loan programs to residents in the community. And so we've been able to, we're currently servicing about 132 loans. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but that's actually generates a revenue for us. The state pays us for servicing those loans. And then we'll have that portfolio to add our new rehab loans to. The deed monitoring, and I just looked at the deed monitoring results for Mount Crested Butte. We sent out 64 affidavits, and I just compared that with the list that Leah had sent to me. There are 73 deed restricted properties on your list. Some of those are not built yet, like Homestead. So those, you know, we mailed an affidavit to the developer for a lot of those properties. But so we sent 64 out. We had, what's 64 minus 30? Well, that would be 34. So 34 were returned, 34 were returned compliant, 5 were returned where we, based on the information provided by the property owner, figured that these properties are probably in violation. Some of them we know they are, like Trent Sanderson. We're working through his violation. So some were, 5 were returned where they appear to be violations, and so that'll be our focus for Mount Crested Butte on getting those cured. And then 25 were just not returned at all, and that's We did send out 2 mailings to everyone. And after the second mailing, we didn't, for those that we did not get responses back from, we just did not continue to send notices out to them or follow up with those owners. And that is all on me. I will say it's on me. We just physically did not have the time to track down the 30 owners that did not respond. So that's one of our goals for next year when we can jump back into the deed monitoring and work through the process. Deed monitoring is time consuming and it is not easy, especially when you have to follow up with a property owner, locating them, getting them to talk to you, and working through what the resolution is, takes time, and it takes a lot of conversation, and it's also it's a legal process. We have to pay attention to what the terms of the deed restriction are and what they say we can and cannot do as far as our due diligence, and then following up with the town on what the enforcement is. And for those of you that were here during the Trent Sanderson hearing that we had, that's a process of taking deed monitoring all the way to the very end, where the homeowner comes before council to present their case and ask council to accept their situation, whether they're really in violation or not. That depends on the situation. But so that's one that, as you all know, we took all the way to council. It's a very time-consuming process, and it does take a lot of background work, because the last thing I want to do is put somebody in front of you saying they're in violation and they may not be. So so the deed monitoring is something we will continue to work on, but I feel pretty good about the results of that. I know it's not 100% satisfactory, but for our first year of really doing follow-up with property owners in Mount Crested Butte for this purpose, I feel like we did okay. And you are welcome to not feel okay, and you are welcome to tell me that you don't feel okay about it. I understand. Yeah, so that's how that went. The GV Heat program was off the charts as far as success. Gisa, who runs that program, is the best at going out and finding pots of money that will allow her to do work on properties that some of the larger and normal funding sources won't do. And so she was very, very good about finding money and finding ways to help people with that. One of the things that's been very successful through Crested Butte is the Green Deed program, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that's a program where we focus on deed restricted properties and providing the heat services to deed restricted properties. In particular, the town of Crested Butte put $35,000 towards doing just that, just the deed restricted properties. We figured that would get us, I think we were 8 properties, and we were actually able to complete 12 assessments and upgrade those 12 homes. So it might be something you want to think about. Some of the deed restricted properties in Mount Crested Butte are aging. And so it'd be a very good thing to go in, do that energy assessment on them. It gives the homeowner a report on, here's some simple things that you could do to improve the energy efficiency of your home. And then we can also come in with our program money and do fixes that are free to the homeowner. So it should be something that we talk about maybe for next year, if you want to set aside some of the funds that you have dedicated to affordable housing for that. Let's see here. What else did we do? We did a lot of training last year. Fortunately for us, there were a lot of training opportunities that came back that were absent in 2020. And so there's a lot of certifications that need to be done for some of the programs that we run, properties that we own for affordable housing. And so having the opportunity to get those certifications done, get them up to date, and be operating the way that some of our investors or DOLA or Division of Housing or HUD require. Where everybody's back on track with that. So we completed the 2021 housing market update. As you may be familiar with, we presented that, I believe it was in June or maybe July of last year. And then let's see, what else did we do that was of note? I was appointed to the governor's Special Eviction Prevention Task Force in late 2020, and that carried through 21. And then also appointed to the Strategic Housing Working Group, which met throughout 2021 to present recommendations to the governor, which that was done in late 21, and some of those recommendations have already been implemented. A lot of them relative to the tenant-landlord relationship and relative to what landlords can and cannot do for rent increases, for evictions, for late fees on late fees on late fees. And so there was a lot of work done around that. And then Governor Polis did appoint me to sit on the CHAFA Board of Directors last summer. And I was just confirmed by the Senate Finance Committee last month for sitting on that board. And I feel that that's quite an honor, and it gives us an opportunity really to connect with CHAFA, which is the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, and that is the state housing authority. And they're the ones that review tax credit applications and offer a number of development assistance programs as well as funding for development. So it's good for Gunnison County to have a voice on that board, but it's also very good for the Western Slope to have a voice. Sometimes I feel like we're the squeaky little wheel at the table because the need on the Front Range is so big that sometimes we just here in the rural parts of Colorado feel like we're not being paid attention to, but we are. So those things were pretty exciting. Let's see, it was a good year. What else can I tell you? It's not very exciting, sexy stuff. Unfortunately, we didn't have launches of deed restricted neighborhood sales, except for right at the end of the year, we had 4 homes down here in the Lazy K subdivision, deed restricted homes that we went to lottery with. And all of those were sold and all of those people moved in by the end of February. So it's exciting for that. There was not a lot of turnover of deed restricted properties during the year. I think that is mostly a function of there was no place else for people to go. If they wanted to move around the county, there's not a lot of real estate that's available that they could afford to sell their home and move up into. Some of that is a function of the amount of appreciation that deed restricted properties that have caps to them. You know, they're not getting that 21, 24, 32% appreciation every month like we have seen in the open market. But that, you know, this market is an anomaly, and this market is not the type of market that we should look at and say, this is a trend that's going on and we need to rethink what our affordable housing programs are and how we protect our investments into deed restricted properties. This is kind of one of those where we just kind of hunker down and people stay where they are until their opportunities come up or their finances change to where they could move into something more of a market rate house. And I'm sure there's more. It felt like there was a heck of a lot more that went on. We had the hostel negotiations where we were negotiating with potential buyers of the hostel down in Crested Butte. That went on for a number of months and consumed a lot of time and energy. Did not result in anything, but it was good lessons learned for the Housing Authority and the Housing Authority Board on negotiating for potential partnerships like that. And I think my board has done a great job on drilling down to, if we have the opportunity again, then here's some of the metrics that we need to see and that we measure on, is this a good investment for, is this a good thing, a good partnership for us to get involved in? So as opportunities come up in the future, the board will have that assessment tool that they can rely on. Let's see here. And it wasn't until 2022 that I announced my retirement on May 27th of this year. So I won't be here next year to report on that, but I'll just tell you that now. So I am open to questions, comments, concerns, whatever you have.
Nicholas.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the presentation. And I just have a quick question. The return rate on the affidavits is, 50% does not seem great. And so I'm wondering, it's been a while since I've looked at the current deed restriction, but is there anything in there that requires, that requires response to these affidavits? So that, lack of response might be a violation in and of itself?
That's a great point to bring up, Nicholas. And this is where we have to read each neighborhood's deed restriction, because some of them do have clauses that state, your responsibility is when the town asks you for information about your use of the property, you have to provide it. So some of that language is in some of the deed restrictions, and some deed restrictions, it is not addressed at all. And those are the ones that are a little tricky. So those are the ones where you contact the owner, say, we think you're in violation, here's how it can be handled, and you hope that you can just build a good relationship with them to fix that. We did get challenged by a number of homeowners and across the county, not just in Mount Crested Butte, who did challenge us and said, what right do you have to ask me to fill this out? And when we got those, then I would go through, read their deed restriction, and either say your deed restriction says you will, or your housing guidelines say that you will. And if it doesn't, it's very difficult to quickly and easily follow up. There are some people that just plain don't want to tell you. There were people who said very rude things to my staff. We got accused of spreading COVID because we made people go out and get notaries. I'm sure they were all at Vinitoc, though, with 4,000 of their best friends, which was not a problem for them. But yeah, it's not a great response rate. And that's one of the other things that we really have to, that I would like us to have in a quick and easy spreadsheet, is this deed restriction says the people will respond, so that down the road, whoever's doing this next can say, oh yeah, if you're in Pitchfork, you do have to respond. And that gives us some leverage in enforcement. So, but off the top of my head, Nicholas, I couldn't tell you which of those deed restrictions has that language, but I'll bet Kathy could. Just kidding, Kathy.
Okay,
Good question.
So I appreciate that, and I guess what I'm wondering though is for deed restrict, and I realize what's passed is past, but for deed restrictions going forward, is such language included or attempted to be included?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes, yes.
Okay, Lauren,
Thanks. Jennifer, congratulations on your upcoming retirement and also your appointment to the Chaffel Board. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
And when you're looking back at 2021, your year in review, I know that the constraints are always time and money. If the Housing Authority and you had access to kind of unlimited time and money, what were some of the things that you could have accomplished or would have hoped to accomplish that you weren't able to because of those constraints?
I think and that's a good question, Lauren, and thanks for bringing that up. I think for the resources of time and money, money I would have used for maybe bringing on some additional full-time staff, but that's actually a lot of money when you look at fringe that you have to add to that. Or a less expensive way maybe to have saved some or put additional resources into programs and into getting some of these things done would have been money to buy software that would property management software. And I don't know that there's deed monitoring software out there. We've been talking collectively around the Western Slope on deed monitoring and tracking it. And is there any reasonable software developed for doing that? There's no specific software for that, but there is software again for property management. And there's software for monitoring and tracking short-term rentals. And so we're thinking about maybe one of those could be repurposed for doing the deed monitoring. But we're talking $25,000, $30,000 for some of those, and that's just not extra cash that unfortunately the Housing Authority has. So that would be one thing that I would have looked at is how could we use additional money to buy programs that would make my staff more I'm at loss for the words, to maximize my staff's time and get more work done. There's never enough time in the day. So time again would have been towards deed monitoring. Looking back on the year, I think that's probably the one of the things that I see as not necessarily a fail, but an accomplishment not made. So additional time would have helped with that. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Thanks.
Roman.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I just have a couple of things. I'd like to back up to the deed restriction stuff. I guess I'll fall in the camp of not being okay with the results and frankly the effort. Help me figure something out here. So you can't go and knock on somebody's door and ask if they're the owner of the property?
You sure can.
So sending somebody out with a clipboard or a
I don't-
tablet on a day?
I don't have anybody to send out. That's one of the things in answering Lauren's question. If I had time and money, what would I
Perhaps
do?
it's
I would-
maybe a directive from the board to give your successor, because to send out 2 rounds of letters and calling that an effort is hardly enforcing a deed restriction when you've got tons of people looking for housing, and objectively you probably have a lot of people abusing the system meant to help others. and it just seems like a minimal effort. So
It seems like,
maybe the board
yeah,
can address
and
that.
I agree. It does seem like a minimal effort, and truly, if there were days where I could send a staff member out to knock on doors, I would have done it. That's not the best use of our time, and I know you don't like hearing me say that. I don't like saying it either, but I have to weigh, do I continue to manage 78 units in 5 different properties? Do I continue to pay the bills? Do I keep running the heat program? I could have gone out and done those things, but then there is a whole list of stuff that doesn't get done. So it's a matter of, I like to call it triage. We have to figure out what's bleeding the most and where do we fix it. And we did fix some deed restriction violations. We did get 4 or 5 big ones remedied during the year. Unfortunately, Trent Sanderson wasn't one of them. And he's probably the most well-known in the Mount Crested Butte area. And now we have some bigger issues with getting the Trent Sanderson violation taken care of, which is a property condition issue and is totally beyond my control, totally beyond the deed restriction control. And that's something that Carlos and Hillary and I have talked about a little bit in the past, and will continue to do so to see how we can fix that. But you know, I agree with you, 50% response rate for Mount CB isn't great. It's not.
Yeah, well, I maybe, you know, again, it's the perhaps the direction of the board moving forward, if they want to prioritize and while it's important and admirable to help people save some money on their heating bills, it could be argued that a priority would be getting 30 people that deserve to be in a deed restriction to get into those. And so if you can help me out with process, and I'll use an example, there's a unit and the entry of Pitchfork, I forget, it's like they called like it's the ones on the left just past the entrance of Pitchfork. It's a sub association. I forget what it's called.
Is that the Lazy S condo? Got 5 units in it?
Maybe. Lauren, Steve, can you help me out with this sub association is over there?
The one along that's more fronts Gothic versus the ones on the
Yeah,
inside.
it's under where Elmer lives.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
yeah, that unit, is that a deed restricted, or that is a deed restricted unit? So in a case where something's for sale, is there a directive or teeth to require the seller to lower the price until someone buys it?
There is no requirement to make them lower the price. And now we're going to start getting into some legal areas here where Kathy would probably want to be part of that conversation. So there is nothing that says if it doesn't sell, if you're in violation and it doesn't sell within X number of days, you have to lower the price. There is nothing that says that, which then does put some limitations on how much we can push the seller to correct the violation through selling the property. With Mr. Sanderson's unit, which is in the Lazy S condos, which is where that big violation is, his max sales price, which was set by council, and I believe that was March of 20 or 21, they blend together, I'm sorry, he was given a max sales price of $227,477. He has it listed at $205. It did go under contract, and it was under contract for a number of weeks. And unfortunately, the condition of the property and the HOA the small Lazy S HOA within the bigger Pitchfork HOA is such that the secondary market will not purchase a loan over 80% loan to value unless you have an A+ borrower, which this borrower who went under contract to purchase it was not A+. He was A, but he was not A+ enough that he could get a high enough loan to value for the lenders to make the loan. And this is a problem with the property. The HOA needs to revise their dues structure so that they're putting money into their reserve account, because that's what lenders need to see. And they need to do that anyway. And that's another conversation that Carlos and Hillary and I are going to have, is how do we force that small HOA to increase their dues so they can put money into reserves so that it's now a loanable property, plus take care of the mold that's going on in there, replace the siding and fix the roof leaks.
Well,
We have
yield.
absolutely no teeth to make that happen.
Yeah, before I yield to Steve here, it sounds like what council may want to consider is addressing some what appears to be serious holes and weaknesses in the deed restriction program, and similar holes in its enforcement. I mean, it seems like there's just weaknesses on both sides that need to be addressed.
Yeah, and there's also
Steve?
lessons learned. That deed restriction was written a long time ago. And so there are lessons that we learn as properties perform over time, and owners perform over time with that deed restriction. And in the case of violations, how you can go about and cure it. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely something that we take into consideration when we put together your community housing guidelines. Carlos and Willa and I took some real long looks at how we can put language together for enforcement, and HOAs. We did put some of that language in there too about getting a responsible HOA, but that's the kind of thing you have to do from the beginning of a neighborhood. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to go in after a deed restriction neighborhood is developed and that deed restriction is in place and put a more restrictive covenant on it than what you already have. So a well noted, Roman, I agree with you. Well noted though.
Okay, Steve.
It was cool. Thanks, Jennifer. Quick question. How broad is the goal of streamlining the deed restricted program? And have you identified some specifics to that for your successor to implement?
That's a really big question, because deed restricted program, when you say that to me, that means neighborhoods that have deed restrictions on them.
Sorry, I guess I'm speaking specifically to the goals 2022 of streamlining the deed monitoring program.
The deed monitoring?
Yeah, I left that out. So yeah, the deed monitoring program, are there things you've already identified? They're like, well, we just need to implement this and that, outside of maybe just increasing the outreach process. Is there anything else you've got ideas for?
Yeah, we've identified that the probably the best way to, it's not the best, one of the ways that we can hopefully get a better response rate is by having the deed monitoring affidavit completed totally online, rather than this past year, we sent people out postcards, mailed them out postcards to their last known mailing address, and asking them to go to our website, go to a specific place in our website, print their affidavit, and then send that in to us. Cumbersome, a lot of people didn't like doing it. A lot of people who live out of town didn't feel that they needed to do it. A lot of people didn't feel they needed to do it anyway. But I think if we can get it online through our website. That's one way to make it easier for people to respond. And we do have some examples from other communities that we can use for that. They have far greater financial resources than we do to create and write a program for that, because they did write their own program. Unfortunately, I just don't have an extra $50,000 in our bank account to write a program like that. So with the new website that we have, one of the things we asked for from the developer was we want the ability for people to go into our website and fill out a fillable form, which then we would implement for the deed monitoring. So I think that will help. And then also just finding out things like, no, this isn't the property owner that everybody had of record. There's somebody else that owns the property, or this is no longer their address. They have moved and they have an address not in Indiana, but in Texas. And so there's a lot of tracking and tweaking to be done. But so we are exploring those things. And I think probably one of the more effective ways will be if we can have the response done right online through our website. Does that answer your question? Do you want?
Hey, Jennifer, again, congratulations on your appointments and thank you for the work you've done for the county for how many years has it been now? 3?
That feels like 50, but I think it's 5.
5 years? Anyway, and we wish you well in your retirement. So
thank you.
Anyway,
I appreciate that.
thank
And
you
I
for
will
this
say
meeting.
I've always enjoyed working with Mount Crested Butte. You guys are reasonable and a lot of fun, and you have really good staff. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Okay. Moving on to the emissions tax budget allowed appropriations. This goes to Kathy.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm doing kind of a hybrid on my phone and on the computer because it keeps telling me my internet's unstable. So all the fun. So Tiffany had sent me an email a few weeks ago asking whether we should update the town code, section 19-135, which is where the admissions tax code provisions are located. And the main point of her question was because there had initially been a sunset on this admissions tax, which was extended by vote of the electors in Mount CB to, I guess this was done in 2009, and now it has an indefinite term. So we started looking at whether we needed to change that provision to take out the sunsetting language in the code. And then I had asked Tiffany, how had the council allocated the ad tax funds? And you can see in the memo that ISA put together and I worked with her on the language that was in the ballot question, which is that not less than 25% of the tax revenues will be utilized for transportation and the remainder for marketing and event sponsorship. So when Tiffany and ISA informed me that the council in the 2022 budget process had put 5% of the ad tax into reserves, we started talking about one, changes to the code, but also changes to that 5% reserve allocation, because that is not one of the approved uses that the voters were voted on. So basically, there's 3 proposed actions and 3 proposed motions that are contained in the meeting packet and that staff report. One is to determine where that 5% reserve should be allocated, because it can't just be a reserve that is unallocated. These monies either have to go to transportation or they have to go to market and event sponsorship. That doesn't mean you have to spend them all every year, but you can't just put them in a reserves within the general fund or elsewhere without them being dedicated to these two options. Then we would need to amend the 2022 budget to budget ordinance to reflect reallocation of this reserve category. And 3, then direction to staff just to update section 19-134 of the town code. So those are things that we'd ask that council consider, and certainly I can answer questions. Carl does either a year end or maybe a mid-year, hopefully also a mid-year budget ordinance. So that's something that could come here pretty soon, or we can get it prepared for the first meeting in April. That's probably more ideal, since technically that the reserve isn't lawfully being collected right now. And then determine where you want to put that money, and then the ordinance can follow changing the code provisions. So are there questions on that?
I'll call Nicholas in a second. I see that, one of the questions we have to decide is where that 5% goes. And it doesn't need to go into the in-house transportation part. So it's whether we want it to go to Mountain Express or back into marketing. The events part is kind of our question that we need to answer. Nicholas.
Yes, Janet, and that's actually the basis of my question. Could we just allocate that out of the reserve account, the reserve category that we can't do, and leave it in the account?
Yes, I mean, you can just say that you want anything that's been received thus far. So that'd be the first 2 months of the year so far. But any money funds that have gone into that 5% reserve be reallocated back into, I'm not sure, Carl would have to explain more to me as far as how he categorizes these things within the budget. But if it goes back into the ad tax total budget, and then you guys reallocate from there in the future, would be fine, or reallocate it back to transportation, that could also work. I don't exactly know how he has it set up within the budget. So we need a little bit of input from him on that.
And so just to confirm my understanding, we're essentially talking about semantics here. We can't have a reserve fund, but we can leave money in the ad tax fund, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it semantics. I would say you are not required to spend everything in the ad tax fund each year, but you are limited to spending them, those dollars, on transportation and marketing and event sponsorship. Those are the only places those funds can go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Steve.
I'd like to see the money reallocated back to Mountain Express and transportation.
Anybody else have an opinion?
My opinion is the same as Steve's.
Roman?
The whole point was to have a reserve for spending when something turns, and I understand the of not being able to have a reserve, but if Carl can just create a not sub account, but more of a tracking account to have like a running total of what that base needs to maintain, and just leave it in the fund, and then we can allocate it as necessary. So Nicholas's direction and how do we just sort of categorize or word how we want to hold back that funding, because if we allocate it towards Mountain Express or marketing, then we've already done that thing and we can't pull it back. So I thought the whole point was to have this money being able to be allocated in one way or another.
Okay, Dwayne? I didn't know if Kathy was going to respond to that or not.
Well, I wasn't sure if I was either. So if
Okay.
there's no question, we can.
I'm going for a clarification, down the road that Nicholas was on. Can the motion just be to unallocate the 5% reserve? Would that accomplish the same thing?
Well, I think it has to be a little clearer than that, Dwayne, but I understand what you're saying. If you make a motion to direct that 5% reserve allocation be terminated and any funds collected be put back into the ad tax fund, then it's there and you can reallocate it within the parameters of the ballot language such time in the future that you want, as long as it's transportation and marketing and event sponsorship.
So what would the motion be to do that? Do we need to do tonight, or do we not need to have to get this done tonight?
Well, I think the sooner that you make this motion, the better, because
Okay.
we don't want to be in violation of this voter approved revenue change, for one thing. Carl can bring forward the budget ordinance amendment for the next meeting. And we can also bring the ordinance to amend section 19-134 of the town code back for April as well. But if you can direct tonight to reallocate the 5% reserve that's in the 2022 budget back to the admissions tax fund, I think that gives Carl sufficient direction. And to stop anything that's been collected thus far back to the ad tax fund. That'll give Carl enough direction. We can put an ordinance together. So if somebody wants to try to say what I just said, we can do that, or.
Roman?
Yeah, I'm working on doing that. What is the reserve fund called right now, just so I can craft the motion? The inappropriate 5% reserve, I guess.
Well, as I understand it, and I wasn't part of the budget ordinance process, but that it was just 5% to reserves within the general fund. So I think you don't call it improper, just say the 5% budgeted to reserves in the 2022 budget.
Okay, so I move to reallocate the 5% reserves in the general fund back to the admissions tax fund with direction to maintain the accumulated that funding and future accumulated 5% funding in the admissions tax budget to be allocated per the ballot language. Does that go?
That works.
Okay,
Good job.
good job.
My head hurts.
Do we have, okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on this? Leah,
May I ask who seconded that motion?
Dwayne,
Okay, thank you. Nicholas,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Mayor Janet.
yes. Okay, the next is authorizing the mayor to execute a lease for our town manager housing. I have some excellent news for you. We have a,
Oh, wait. That'll come up later.
what?
Oh, wait, unless you were heading down the road of talking about a house.
Yeah, the house.
Okay, sorry, Janet, continue on. My apologies.
Okay, we have some excellent news in that I was contacted on Thursday by a friend of mine who has bought one of the villas and wanted to offer it up to the town for us to have for town manager housing. And so those are, I don't know if everybody's been in those, but they're very nice. They're 3-bedroom, 2.5 baths, 1-car garage, stone fireplaces. It's all totally furnished and ready to go. And so I've been talking with her, negotiating out, costs and talking with Carl. And he said it's doable. And so I need a motion to move forward with that lease.
Well, can I add a couple things as
Yeah.
well? So this would be for town manager housing. And as you know, we are working on the process of getting an interim town manager. Ultimately, there will also be a permanent town manager, or at least full-time hired through the process town manager. And so the housing will be necessary either way. I don't think Janet mentioned price, and I don't know if there's parameters around that yet, Janet.
I do have the price
will
from
be.
I do have the
Okay.
price from her, $4,000 a month, which I understand is kind of the going rate for that size, and amenitied place. And she pays all the utilities and the HOA fees.
And
And I
then
told her
how
that-
long was the lease term and when would it be ready?
I told her that we would, be looking at leasing it in until Homestead was ready, so probably at least 2 years. I didn't pin that down yet.
Okay, and it was roughly mid-April that it'd be ready, right?
Yes, it'll be ready. They're having the current owners are in it till the end of the month. And then they're having a little bit of work done on it, and it's supposed to be finished April 15th. And so then it would be ready to go. Are there any questions, other questions on this? Roman?
Thank you for the legwork, and this is a nice solid opportunity. I'm wondering how other counselors would feel if we followed through with well, first of all, I guess I would ask, was any other legwork done between you and Dwayne from the last meeting to property management companies, et cetera?
We started doing some work, and then when things kind of went in a different direction last week, we decided to stop until we knew what exactly we would be looking for. We didn't know if we would be looking for, who knew what we were going to be looking for. And so we, kind of stopped until this, and then I had this opportunity that just kind of fell in my lap, and I thought, well, this kind of answers a lot of the questions that we have. And I don't know that, we're going to do much better of 4,000, including all utilities paid. And she said the HOA fees run about, a little over 1,000 a quarter. So, that adds to, what she's picking up.
Yeah. Well, I see some other folks have their hands raised. I guess what I might suggest is if she's not chomping at the bit to get this into somebody else's hands, for $4,000 is not cheap. And it doesn't sound like we've done really our due diligence from the last meeting, and there might be some opportunities, and put an ad in the paper. Not that I wouldn't vote for this necessarily, but this is the first place that's come along. So
And I should also mention
throwing
she's
it out
okay
there.
with, she's okay with the pets. And so far,
Yeah.
the few interim managers that we've talked to, potential interim managers we've talked to have had pets. And I know that's a big hang up on a lot of places. Dwayne, do you want to add anything to?
No, I just wanted to, specifically to Roman's question about have, any other inquiries been made in the meantime. I've talked to several, three other individuals, property managers, and, they said they would look, they would put feelers out, but they were not aware of anything immediately available.
And I did talk to 2 property managers as well. Steve,
Is the strategy here to use this for an interim town manager and then go through the hiring process for a town manager? And then should a town manager that already has housing accept a position, then what would we do with this place? Just rent it free market?
yeah, probably.
Okay.
I mean, she might be able to, allow us to write the lease loose enough that, time frame, might be loose. I didn't pin her down on that. So do y'all want to move forward with this, or do you want Dwayne and I to keep working? Roman,
I personally think it's worth having the conversation with her to see if, we've got a month or it's available. I think we have an opportunity to do some due diligence, and maybe it was my perception of what we would be seeing at this meeting, that I suppose I was looking for more of like a memo or a report, or, I called this person, we took this action. It just kind of sounds like a couple phone calls were made, and then that was sort of it. I mean, I would like to see an ad in the paper. I'm sure there's people out there that have no idea we're having this conversation, that has a property somewhere, maybe an accessory dwelling, that they would contemplate opening up. Does anybody feel similar or different?
I'm not sure that, an accessory dwelling's an appropriate, place for us to be
Well, I mean,
hiring,
accessory
picking
dwellings are in
for
the
our
whole
town
gamut,
manager.
but I guess the 2 of you were kind of tasked with coming back to us with information, and I'm just not seeing it, I guess.
I would say that, Roman, you're welcome to, jump in and provide any assistance that you'd like in that domain. If you, are unsatisfied with what we're doing, come on.
Well, yeah, I think we came up with this specifically so everybody wasn't doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I started,
If you're unsatisfied with what is being accomplished, jump in and, participate.
I mean, I was really excited that we found something. Because, they're just, from the looking and asking that all of us have done out there so far, we haven't come up with anything that's been, appropriate and, fits, potentially having pets and everything else that, we'd be looking at, and on the same kind of level of what we think homestead will eventually be. And I think that's what the kind of thing that we should be looking for. So, I had started, I made a flyer, to, post around town, but I just got stopped because I didn't know, what exactly, we were doing and looking for, based on how things have gone in the last 2 weeks. Nicholas.
I would yield to Lauren first, please.
Well, thanks, Nicholas. I was just going to say, I think that we're in a situation where we need to act with urgency. And I think that we have something available and the lease can start within a month. It allows pets. Yes, it's not perfect. It's more money than we want to spend. But I think putting this off or not taking this opportunity would be very foolish for us as a council. Given the situation that we are in, we need to bring in leadership as soon as possible, and having a nice place for them to live is going to really be a large benefit to both our council and the community as a whole. So I think there is no reason to delay securing a house for an interim manager.
Okay, Nicholas.
I agree with Roman. It is probably on the higher end of what I was thinking, but I also agree with Lauren. I think it's urgent, and we could have an interim town manager a month from now. And so I think having something in place for that person, whoever it is, as well as our future town manager, is really important. I think I've personally learned some lessons from the last go around with the housing bit, and I don't want to be in that situation again. And so again, it's a little hard to swallow the monthly on that, but I'm supportive of it.
Steve.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with this. If we can just, in your discussions or negotiations with her, just look at giving us either a sublease or an out option of some sort, just so we're not stuck sitting there holding it empty. Should, an interim come and go very quickly, or it ends up being, this process could easily run most of the year anyway. So, but I'm all on board.
Okay. One of the things she did say, if there was a period of time where it was sitting empty, that she might, do a lower rent if it's just sitting empty while we're like in between or whatever. So I thought that was a very generous offer as well. Lauren.
I think it's Kathy. Oh,
Lauren has her hand up.
Okay, so do I.
Oh, I'm
Next.
sorry. I didn't see
I'll be
it.
after Lauren.
This might be a question for Kathy, but looking at the agenda item is not actually to approve any specific lease. It's just to authorize the mayor to execute a lease. Is that, so are we voting on this specific property, or just allowing our mayor to make a decision if it comes up? Just want to make sure I know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of what I was going to address. It sounds like there could still be some negotiating room on this particular property. When we put this agenda item together, this one was a possibility, and it's come a little bit more clear within the few days since the agenda was put together. So I think we are talking about this specific property, but I can definitely work with Janet and see what we can negotiate and bring the actual form of lease back to council for your official approval if you want that, and authorization for Janet to sign it for the first meeting in April. And
Yeah,
I think
I wouldn't want to sign off on it without y'all actually seeing the final lease.
Yeah. So I think our agenda item wording isn't the best for what we're actually talking about tonight.
How might you suggest it be worded to accomplish allowing Janet to potentially negotiate
a lease?
Yeah, and Janet, if you can provide as much about the specifics of the property, if you know the address or the owner or something that council can put into a motion, or even just the property that Mayor Janet described, at tonight's meeting. But anyway, that one that we're heading toward, and obviously if something else pops up in the meanwhile, that's something that council can consider as well.
Yeah.
So should the motion not have a specific address? Because if something else were to come up, then we'd have to wait for another meeting to then authorize the mayor to negotiate a lease for a different property.
It's a valid point.
Can I?
Want to just say
I
negotiate?
mean, I can later in the week do some more calls to some property managers. You know, I have a little bit of time tomorrow, and I have, at least at the moment, and I have a little bit of time on Friday, and I can make some more calls and see if there's anything that's a better deal, but I would be highly surprised.
Well, I think we're just trying to keep it as general as possible, Janet, so that if
Sure.
something pop up. So I think to Lauren's question, to negotiate a lease for town manager housing is probably the broader language that you're looking for, Lauren.
Yeah, and I think if something else were to come up that we wanted to discuss, that's great too. But in the meantime, since this is what we have on the table, I think, or I will move to authorize the mayor to negotiate a lease for town manager housing.
Second,
Any further discussion? Roman?
Well, it sounds like, Janet, you're going to be coming back to council with other information. So should we not expand the motion to include and execute? Doesn't sound like Janet's going to go rogue and just willy-nilly sign a lease. So if we authorize her to negotiate and execute, we don't have to have another maybe necessary motion a later time. I don't know, just a thought.
I'm comfortable
Kathy,
with the
do you have any?
comfortable with the negotiate, and that we finalize it at the April 5th council meeting.
Okay, I have nothing to add.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
I
Leah.
actually,
Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Lauren.
I think that's a really good point that Roman just brought up. If we authorize the mayor to both negotiate and execute, that doesn't mean that you have to execute. And I think clearly we'd all like to maybe take a look at that first, but that way, if something comes up before the meeting, then we can move forward with it because we already granted you
Okay.
the power to sign something. So I think Roman brings up a good point. I'm just going to amend my motion to authorize the mayor to negotiate and execute a lease for the town manager housing.
Wayne, you okay with that?
yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
Second,
Any other discussion? Leah?
Michael,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Dwayne,
yes,
Nicholas,
Yes.
Mayor Janet.
Yes. Okay, appointment of an acting town manager. Carlos is here with us this evening, I guess sort of as an extension of the acting town manager from, well, Isa was out on sick leave, but he's going to be out of pocket starting tomorrow through the 23rd. That was a yes, I think.
That is correct.
Okay, and so we, Carlos, looking at having Carl be our acting town manager starting tomorrow until March 24th, and then it reverting to Carlos to pick up the slack until we hire an interim town manager.
Yeah, and if I,
Oh, you said we needed to use a different term?
Well, it's the code provisions and the charter isn't particularly helpful. If we have an actual, a town manager, that person nominates a person to serve in their stead if they're not available, which is what ISA had done and nominated Carlos, and that's where we stand now. All of council seems to agree that Carlos is the acting town manager. But then if you don't have a manager, the council has 6 months to appoint a manager. And so these terms, acting, interim, or manager, are all a little bit interchangeable in my mind. So I guess my suggestion is Carlos can certainly be the acting town manager / Carl for the time that he's gone until ISA's actual term with the town ends on March 22nd. But at that point, I think if the council hasn't selected a person who will serve between now and hiring a manager through the search process, that the council will have to come back and talk to Carlos and or Carl about what the, kind of the interim role looks like until we get to that point of either getting somebody on board who is actually going to fill that role for the town until the search process is over and a new manager is hired, or you guys go a different direction as far as keeping Carl or Carlos or something like that. But that this interim process or this acting manager process doesn't, drag on for months without, kind of accommodating what these people are being asked to do with their regular jobs and serving as manager of the town between tonight and getting what we'll just call an interim town manager on board. So it's not that you really need to do anything different tonight. I just kind of wanted to line that out for you guys to be thinking about as March 24th comes or the beginning of April, that kind of thing. Now we really don't have a manager that has nominated an acting manager, and we probably won't have an interim manager on board in the official sense of someone outside the organization, if that's the way you guys are going. So just be prepared for maybe a little bit further action on this piece going forward.
Dwayne.
I am interested in allowing Carlos an opportunity to respond to this whole thing. What's your thinking, Carlos?
I appreciate that, Dwayne, and yeah, I've had these conversations with multiple folks here, and yeah, I'm comfortable with the direction.
Okay.
Roman.
Thanks. Kathy, is town manager pro tem a thing? Or do you just have to have a you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's not a term. It's a good one though. Yeah, it's weird. It's what I would call kind of a hole in the charter. I mean, the charter can say you have to appoint a manager within 6 months, but what if you can't? And so that's why we've kind of gone with this interim town manager process. And all I'm saying is that there's some leads you'll hear about here shortly. And I'm going to speak for Carlos a little in the sense that he may be willing to do that, but we can't just call him acting town manager for an extended period of time without, kind of addressing what that really means for the person in that role and how they need to function for themselves and for the betterment of the town.
so to be clear, just so maybe we could advance this, are we not doing anything tonight, or are we
We haven't.
different title and
Go ahead.
And is he then going to recommend Carl? I'm just, I guess I'm not clear of like the
Well,
steps.
I mean,
Right.
Carlos is going to be somewhere where he can't help us at all. He's going.
No, I understand that, but
And that's why.
are we having to do anything with Carlos's existing title for him to recommend or nominate Carl to town manager?
I don't think so. I think you guys just need to make a motion that Carlos is the acting town manager. In his absence, it will be Carl. And then, the town will take further action regarding an interim manager in the future. I think a motion similar to that will suffice for tonight.
This is Nicholas, so moved.
Second.
Okay, Dwayne,
I'm concerned about Carlos's well-being, and as I'm sure that we all are, but he's obviously taking on exponentially larger responsibilities than he has before. So, I think that it's appropriate that we include some type of extra compensation for his willingness to step up in this way. I know that when he operated in this capacity before, we paid him more money, and I think that we should do that, starting, today, for this go round as well.
Kathy,
Dwayne, I think your point is well made. The nuances to this is Carlos is leaving tomorrow till the 24th. He won't be back. And then you guys have some other things to talk about further on tonight that may lend a little more clarification to where the town is heading tonight and in the future. And then I think there's time to address what you just said and who will be filling that role pretty quickly, possibly even before Carlos gets back from vacation. So it's on the table, no question, but I don't think that's something that you guys have to do tonight.
yeah, it's something we could probably do in retro. And going back to his start date of being acting. Roman,
Thank you. It sounds like either way, we need to be conscious of developing a list of expectations for whoever is in that role sooner than later. And I don't disagree with
Kathy and
Dwayne's
I-
line of thought.
yeah.
And I don't disagree with Dwayne's line of thought pending, further conversations tonight, obviously. So,
yeah, I
thanks.
think Kathy and I have both had some conversations with Carlos about, what would be needed of him as acting town manager. And we would definitely pin that down further.
And-
So is there any other, Carlos, go ahead.
Oh, I just add, I know there's further discussion, this evening, for the interim position. So I'm working under the, assumption that I know that you are all trying to move quickly with getting that, appointment in place. So yeah, as Kathy alluded to, time frame, obviously will play a role in this as well, depending on how long it goes. But I'm working under the assumption that this could happen very quickly. And I think that's the only issue at hand tonight, is just having someone in place for the short term, however short term that might be. And then if as things materialize there, then yeah, we can get a little bit deeper into setting the expectations if it is a longer term acting town manager. And we can talk about the compensation stuff as well. And I appreciate all of you for taking that into consideration. But right now, I've had conversations. I understand, where we are and where we're trying to get. And again, I'm comfortable taking on that role and given the current circumstances and expectations.
And I have talked to Carl as well, so it's not a surprise to him. Okay, any other discussion? Leah,
Dwayne,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Nicholas,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mayor Janet.
yes. Okay, homestead update. Do we have anything we could share, Kathy?
Yeah, we have a little bit. I did speak with Joe Rivera, the town's special counsel, and just asked him to give me what he could that could be public information at this point on Homestead. And I think some of you probably already know this, but February 22nd, Dunnickilly, the firm that the council authorized and hired to inspect the buildings at Homestead Development, did come out. They went through the property, did their inspection process. Their plan, and I think they remain on track for this, is to deliver a report to the town on their findings in late March. So that's still consistent with I think what you guys heard initially. And they'll evaluate the value of the improvements on site, an opinion of cost, time, that kind of thing to complete the construction. When we know that report is available, we'll schedule an executive session with council and special counsel Joe Rivera and go through that, obtain council's goals and approach, and go with that as far as trying to work through, ideally, again, a settlement with Lance Wendell and his council, or take such further action as necessary. And we'll keep you all apprised, but we're still on target for late March for getting that. And so it could be the beginning of April that we're reviewing that with you and talking about next steps.
Any questions for Kathy? Okay, moving on to reports, discussion items, and announcements. The first is the town manager's report, which from the looks of it, it looks like ISO wrote it. And so I don't know if, we really have anyone to appropriately answer questions on that. I do have one question as far as the wayfinding that maybe Roman or Michael can answer. Did the DDA appropriate any more funds for moving forward with the wayfinding?
Yeah, yeah, we actually voted to continue with the wayfinding.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Roman was there. Weren't you, Roman? Yeah, you're there.
Okay.
I will say it was a pretty awesome process to be a part of. It was incredibly thorough, and the report is actually pretty engaging. It's long but engaging, and it's to see the methodology is pretty cool, and to be brought along, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, the process for
something is-
working on the logo, I wish everybody had been there to be part of it. And if I think you can go online somewhere and put your input in on the logo. You should do that if you weren't at the wayfinding meeting that we had last week. Okay, clerk's report. Leah, do you have anything from Tiffany?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, department head reports. The first thing is capital projects, which is Evan, and let him share whatever more he has to share beyond his written report, and give you all a chance for questions.
Yeah, and Janet, if I may, before I hand it off to Evan, I'll just do a quick intro here. Let me pull up the report. Evan and I both, this report was originally originated out by Evan from his role as the capital projects manager. And there's a statement in this in his memorandum, in his report, that both he and I disagree with, and it's a statement that says, currently the internet speed reliability is insufficient to support hybrid meetings. So the first step in the process would be to solve, that underlying issue. Evan can elaborate on this, but it's both on what we know, what he knows, based on our conversations with the person who came in to do the assessment, is that, we believe that we do have sufficient, capabilities to provide that service. So I just want to make that point, very clear. Or Evan and I would both like to make that point very clear, and then we can, open it up to questions, and Evan can answer, and and Evan can provide an overview of the report. And just in case, Evan's been working with us since June, and just in case you haven't met Evan yet, and maybe you all have, but if just in case not, I'd like to introduce him as well. He's been a really big asset to us here at Town Hall.
Okay, Evan, would you like to kind of give us a summary or say anything further about your report?
I think Dwayne had a question.
Oh, I was going to let you go first, and then I was going to go to Dwayne.
My apologies, Evan, for jumping in like that. I can wait.
No problem. So if you've seen the memo, a little bit of background. When I started here in June, it was very evident that the internet speeds were subpar. In probably October, ISA asked me to start looking into other services. I started talking with Visionary and with Spectrum about bringing fiber into the town hall. At the same time I was having those conversations, Visionary was able to turn up our speeds on our wireless microwave link. And so the stated speeds that they have are about 300 down and 100 up. We're seeing actual speeds in the range of 170 to down and 70 up, which, as Carlos said, in my opinion, is sufficient. It's sufficient to run a hybrid meeting. A fiber connection is a much better connection because you don't have any issues. So our microwave link hits the cell towers and then shoots down valley. And so when you have snow events, when you have wind events, anything that disrupts that microwave link, you lose speed. It increases latency, increases jitter of the connection, which definitely you need to have a solid connection to have a pleasant hybrid meeting experience. So we reached out to Spectrum and Visionary that both can bring fiber into the building. We chose Visionary to bring it in on a 4-year contract with an anticipated completion date of the install May or June of this year. So middle of the summer, we should have gig speed fiber bilateral connection to town hall. That'll allow us to, one, implement the hybrid meetings. 2, we can look into voice over internet phones because we're out of phone lines here at town hall. There's benefits to our offsite storage and our server management. We can go remote on that as well if we choose to. So, I mean, I think we're going to see a big difference in just our overall connectivity once the fiber's been installed. We also, at the same time, had Concentrix do a kind of an IT health assessment. So it's a firm from the Front Range. They came in just to kind of give us an overview and make sure that our management in Gunnison has been using industry best practices. They found a few items that were of concern, but not major items. We've passed the report. The report was included in the packet. We've also passed the report along to our current IT management company in Gunny for costs and implementation schedule.
Okay, thank you. All right, now Dwayne.
Yeah, on the staff action needed part of your report, it says that provided quotes for hybrid meeting equipment based on the current IT infrastructure. And I just wanted to clarify that the equipment that we have now it's my understanding, was not the correct equipment to have. So why are we, I mean, would not accomplish what we needed in the realm of hybrid meetings. So why are we, looking at this existing?
So ideally, and I went back and I watched the last council meeting, and I was able to key in on the discussion, because that's a conversation that Carlos and I had earlier today is, what does council want to get out of a hybrid meeting? And so I watched the discussion from the last meeting. I understand that council members need to be in the chamber, but we want to have basically a Zoom room where, the folks in the community can do just what y'all are doing. Raise your hand, and somebody can facilitate the questions being asked. So ideally what we would have is we would have integration with the existing AV equipment. So it would be a video camera that also allows the existing microphones to lay over top of that feed, right? And Clear One, which is who AV Experts, that's the equipment manufacturer that's in the existing chambers. Clear One has this capability. So, somebody brought up in the last meeting that, maybe Crested Butte, maybe Gunnison, the people look like ants in the meeting. While and our chamber's a bit smaller, so that may be, we may have less of an issue. The biggest thing is clear audio, right? I'm looking at the meeting now, and it's a panel of 16 on my computer, right? But the audio is clear. And so you can have the video be a wide angle lens mounted in the ceiling that covers the chamber where the council's sitting. You can also have another camera that's covering the audience, and then have the interaction side of it. But having the audio interface with the existing equipment, one, saves money, but two, I think it's going to produce a better product. So that's why I've reached out to AV Experts for a quote to interface the existing equipment.
So essentially, we don't have to scrap everything that we already have. We can just add capacity.
Correct. Clear One is the manufacturer of that equipment, and they have devices that can overlay the audio onto the video stream.
Okay, Roman?
Evan, thanks. This is awesome. I'm gonna just try to repeat some things back to you with a question or two, just so I can see if I've processed it correctly. So initially you called Visionary and just said, hey, can you make our speed faster? And they said, sure.
Well, I started with Greg Larson with GL Computers, who's our IT guy. Right. He has a relationship with Visionary. Okay. And my question to Greg Larson was, have you investigated fiber? And so I started looking at fiber. I started looking at, I live down in Snowfall Point, and I've got Spectrum, and we've got, a cable modem. When you look at Spectrum, they can do gig service, but it's 1,000 download and it's 25 upload, because that's the limitation of the coax. While I was having the conversation with Greg, I believe he was having a conversation behind the scenes, and the speed got turned up. Okay, because
20 and they just turned up the speed, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And
when I first started the process, I would run speed tests on my computer, and I was getting 24 megabits download and 8 megabits upload, and I'd run the same speed test on my cell phone that wasn't connected to our network, and I was getting 80 both ways on T-Mobile 5G. And so Yeah, you knew there was something wrong. We didn't have the,
Right.
and so I don't think that, because it's my understanding that there was some attempts to do a hybrid meeting with an OWL camera. Okay. And so I don't think those attempts, I think they probably failed for the right reason. We didn't have the bandwidth that could do it. We have it, in my opinion, now. I think the issue with our current setup right now is the fact that it's so weather dependent. A microwave link is not near as stable as a hardwired fiber connection.
And that was the next thing. So how does that differ from, so the microwave connection, is that the same thing that somebody like Extreme Internet uses?
It is.
Okay. And then, so you've moved forward with this arrangement with the company, and then let me see what their name was. The
Visionary is
no, it was looking at Collective Next. So would it essentially be like a lease system where it's $3,500 a month? They provide all of the gear, and then
no, the Collective Next was because my understanding was we needed, and I don't know that we need it after reviewing last meeting, right? So what I think, if we want somebody to remotely facilitate hybrid meetings, which Collective Next and Happily both do on a very large nationwide scale, okay? That's where the $3,500 a month came from, is my conversations with them. I'm not going to volunteer anybody in-house, okay? But if we had somebody in-house that can, do what kind of Janet's been doing at this meeting, which is somebody on the Zoom call raised their hand remotely, and then Janet called on them. And so that's kind of, if I'm understanding what council wants from the last meeting, that's what we would need. We would need somebody that was sitting at a computer that possibly in the chamber that could say, well, we have a question from so-and-so.
We don't need that.
so
We don't have that many people.
well, somebody needs to run the meeting to be compliant, or we need certain things in place to be compliant. And maybe that's why Kathy's got her hand up.
Kathy?
Yeah, the way they do it in Gunnison is exactly kind of the way that Evan's describing. So all the counselors are in the room. The clerk has a computer. Usually the city manager does as well. And they just keep track and make sure that if there's anyone from the public that's raised their hand, like some of you guys are doing, with the hand tab on the screen, or literally raising their hand or putting something in the chat or whatever, they just follow along. And so those people that are in, on the Zoom call are called on, when appropriate, and have their opportunity to participate in the meeting that way. So I think that's what Evan is saying, and that's how it could definitely work in chambers between Tiffany, Janet, if you had a computer, or I helped with that, or the manager did, just to make sure that people that are appearing remotely are seen and then given the opportunity to speak as appropriate.
Right.
So then, rounding third to home of my understanding of this, then it sounds like the next step is exploring equipment with AV experts and Happily. And then once a decision is made on a path forward with the equipment, the last step is a person or service to manage the meetings.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
A year's worth of work in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Well, I've been working on it since November, but so not quite 2
Okay.
weeks, but
Thank you either
we're
way.
getting there.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And it really has been a process. We really do need to upgrade the internet speeds prior to making the other decisions, because that'll dictate, if we have a good internet connection, it'll dictate a lot of things. It'll dictate the quality of the stream that we're putting out, right? Are we going to go full 1080p on the stream? It'll dictate, the equipment that we buy, because we want to utilize the new internet connection to its fullest.
Okay, Lauren?
I just wanted to give a huge thank you to everyone who's been working on this. This has been something we've been looking for about a year. So thank you very much, everyone, for the time put into communicating this information.
Okay, Dwayne?
So Evan, we have an option, and I'm just going for clarity here.
Sure.
If we have our own person, the town manager, Janet, whoever it is, if we have our own person calling on people, we don't have to spend $3,500 a month.
Correct.
Right on. I'll volunteer to do it.
Well, and really, let's face it, you're gonna get more response from Janet or from the interim town manager or somebody that's in the meeting than somebody that's trying to manage it remotely. But again, not wanting to volunteer, not wanting to volunteer anybody, and bird dogging what I was told to bird dog. So
I think the mayor can handle that.
there you go.
Okay. We got more, Nicholas?
I agree that I think we could facilitate the meeting ourselves. It seems like that would be limited to public comment, public hearings, and then sort of other things, for convenience. I could see maybe somebody wanting to give a report or appear remotely for some reason. And so it doesn't seem like it would be onerous to have somebody in-house or a council member or the mayor or whoever to facilitate that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is there was some talk, Evan, of a possible solution being everyone being on Zoom. So even counselors in the chambers attending the meeting in person would be on Zoom. And then, to the outside world, it would kind of all look like this. And so I just wondered if that was an option that was considered, or if there were some pro or con to that. And then lastly, before you answer that, I just want to reiterate what other folks have said. Thank you so much for all your work on this, and how thorough your memo is. I have to admit, I did not understand all of it, but I think I have the gist of it. And again, thank you very much.
Sure. To answer everybody on Zoom, can it be done? Sure. Yeah, especially when we have the bandwidth. Is it more distracting for everybody to have their computer up and be on Zoom and trying to interact in person as well? I don't know. Would you want to look at it being, 7 cameras versus one wide angle camera that's mounted in the ceiling? So now you have 7 cameras that are kind of mounted in front of everybody, rather than it being a computer based. I don't know. I don't think that I can answer completely the logistics of everybody being on Zoom in the meeting.
Yeah, I think us interacting with the people that are in the room is a better.
I think we can get a very
Everybody's
high quality wide angle camera for not a tremendous amount of money. You're talking about a $2,000 or $3,000 camera that can put out a great video feed from in the ceiling. That may provide excellent coverage of the entire meeting.
Thank you for that. That answers my question. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Hillary, you wanted to add something?
I would just wanted to add something from a former county employee perspective. The county uses kind of both approaches to their public meetings. And if you are in a planning commission meeting, which is held over on Wisconsin Street, those meetings have the aerial camera in that view, and then some people use the Zoom cameras, but for the most part rely upon that overhead view. And then we have it kind of is like a village approach almost in the planning commission meetings, where everyone is just kind of keeping tabs on when a hand is raised. Whereas the BOCC, it tends to be led by Jonathan a bit more. But then if others, of course, notice, they'll chime in and, note that somebody from the public has their hand raised. And so perhaps something that council might want to consider is maybe just popping in on one of those meetings and seeing how it's run and what it's like. And that could help inform how you want to move forward as a town council and managing the hybrid experience for the public.
Okay, thanks. Kathy?
Yeah, I was wondering, Evan, would it be possible with the room the size of the chambers to have 2 cameras or a camera situated such that it shows all of council and staff who's, up at the table there, and then also whoever's talking at the lectern, however we could place that, so that whoever's watching by Zoom is getting the full picture of what's going on in the room. In other words, they're not just seeing the counselors' faces, but they're also seeing the person who's speaking if it's not at the council table. That's
Sure. We can do a fixed position wide angle camera along with a point tilt zoom, because then you could pick up the audience if you had somebody speaking at a microphone in the audience, or you could pick up somebody speaking at the podium. That, while not tricky, it just adds another layer of complexity as far as the person needs to be able to operate the point. It's not an auto, it's not an auto camera. So somebody would need to operate the point tilt zoom. You could fix it on the audience, and then if somebody was at the podium, somebody would need to swing it over there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Evan. You've done a wonderful job, and we'll look forward to having whatever in place in May or June, whenever this is ready.
But before I leave, I just want to make sure that what I've stated is correct, and that's what y'all are after, right? I don't want to go down chasing something that when I either it gets brought back, which I don't know that it's going to have to, because my understanding there was a budget that was allotted for the equipment, but I want to make sure that I'm providing what you're after as far as the meeting experience.
I think you're on the right track with what was in your memo.
Okay.
What you said tonight. Okay. All right. Next is the community development. Oh. Was there something else about this Mount Crested Butte V4? Was that part of the internet stuff?
That was the actual Concentrix report. So that was the IT health assessment that we had Concentrix perform.
Okay. I looked at the things last Friday, and so community development report. Carlos, do you have anything to add? Does anybody have any questions for Carlos?
Nothing to add, Mayor Janet.
Okay.
Really quick, Carlos, 740 Gothic, that rezoning, is that the A-frame?
It's with the older A-frame with the blue roof, just north of Elk Ridge 3.
Okay. Finance report. Hopefully, if anybody has any questions for Carl, can get with him. The police reports from Nate were typical Nate police reports.
Hey, Janet, can I say something during the police report?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, so yesterday, I went for a walk down in the base area, and 3 of our peace officers were down there. And I just want to say that our police officers and peace officers are some of the best people that I've ever just talked to and met. They were standing at the end of Emmons, right? Because with all the tourists coming in, looking at, Google Maps, trying to get to Butte and Company or Christie Sports or wherever, right? They're driving down Emmons, and, that's a dead end and things like that. And so rather than blame people for driving down there where it says no unloading, no stopping, no drop offs and all that kind of stuff, They politely pointed them in the correct direction, sympathize with them being, sympathize with them, that, yeah, we don't have great directions here. If you want to get in a skier drop off, you actually have to drive into a hotel parking lot, things like that. So they were, if one person drove there, I saw within 30 minutes, I saw 24 cars doing that at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. In no way did they blame any of the tourists or anything like that. They were very, very helpful and personable with everybody that walked in. I thought that was great. They did have some suggestions. Even Matt mentioned that several years ago, or a couple of years ago, even they had a committee to look at skier drop-off locations and things like that. And he just kind of wondered what happened to that. I didn't really have an answer to that. I said I'd kind of bring it up. I thought maybe Janet, you might know what happened to that committee about the parking area there and in the round, in that Mountain Express turnaround area. But the police would obviously very much be interested in getting in on that conversation if that committee starts back up or if they're still meeting. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the police officers and the job that they were doing yesterday.
Yeah, that's great to hear they were doing that. And I don't think we've made any progress on a skier drop off. I think, starting with Joe leaving and going into interim status and then hiring ISA and getting started on the master plan, that kind of just got absorbed into that. So nothing's happened on that would be helpful. Next is town council reports and discussion items. My report, I was supposed to be in the chamber meeting this morning and I ended up doing other town council business. So I didn't get to participate in that. I did check with Scott Clarkson to see if there was anything significant that I needed to report. And there didn't seem to be. But I do want to, Mel Yema emailed me about the April 6th CB Community Compass meeting. She's only heard back from 2 counselors and she would like to know if any of the rest of us are going to be there. So if you will get back to email her and give her a yay or a nay on whether you can participate in that. It's from 9 to 12 at the Art Center on April 6th. And then I had an email this evening from Dan, blank on his last name, the Avalanche Center, that they're doing a thank you party to, and all of us are invited. It's on April 8th from 6 to 10 at Talk of the Town. So you're invited to go party. Are there any other town council reports? Nicholas.
It's not a report, but I was a little slow on the draw when we were in the manager's report portion. And so I just wanted to emphasize the kudos to Leah for the, her compliance efforts, given that we talked about that earlier. And so appreciate that very much. And then also just kudos to staff for getting the whole Airbnb thing worked out. It's wonderful to hear that taxes are being correctly charged. And I look forward to hopefully recovering. And so going forward, we're where we need to be. And I look forward to hopefully recovering some of what we didn't collect in the past. So again, kudos to staff on those points.
Okay. Are there any other council reports? Okay, we'll move on to our first executive session. According with CRS 24-6-4024EI, negotiations on the Nordic Inn option agreement and development agreements, and need a motion to go into the executive session, I just want to be clear with Leah, though, what you're going to put people into a weight room. Is
Yep.
that how we're doing that tonight? Okay.
Yep, and then I'll have to stop this recording and start a new one.
Okay.
Move to go into executive session.
Second,
Second.
Leah?
Let's see, Lauren,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Nicholas,
Yes.
Dwayne,
yes.
Mayor Janet.
Yes.
Leah, before, can you make me the host? When you're, I'm gonna have to share my screen, so.
Okay.
before, you exit, if you can make me the host, which I think you'd have to do anyway, that'd be great.
Sounds good.